Gamecock fans, now you can have your coffee and also support the Gamecocks in a championship quest to get to the top of the SEC and the top of the country by going to GamecockCoffee.com and purchasing Rise and Shine New Orleans Roast Gourmet Coffee. All of your purchases go to benefit Garnet Trust and put NIL dollars in the coffer of the Gamecocks official NIL collective. Check it out today and support the Gamecocks NIL. Good morning, Gamecock fans. JC Shurburtt here with coffee. Today is Tuesday, April 15th, the year of our Lord 2025. It's tax day. It's my late father's birthday. He would have been 73 today. April 15th, certainly a significant day in my life for most of my life, but pleased to be with you today. Happy birthday, Dad, up there in the sky. My namesake, and really the reason I'm talking to you today. Got me into football, loved the game, played quarterback. He was a quarterback. I wasn't a quarterback. My brothers were. And yeah, let's just say he acted like a quarterback. Didn't really understand the tight end, defensive end part. Arrogant, but anyway, reason I'm a Gamecock fan, all that good stuff. I had a lamp when I was a little kid in my room with a white helmet back in the George Rogers era. They wore those throwbacks this year and bought me that. And when Joe Morrison died in 1989, tragically in February, he woke me up. I was already asleep when he found out. I guess back then you saw it on the 11 o'clock news, right? And yeah, so today was his birthday. Died in 1995, so it's been a minute. But Joseph Christopher Shurburtt Sr., happy birthday, my man. Lots to talk about today. Big picture wise, I had kind of a granular spring scrimmage specific talk yesterday, but to the schedule, spring sports again tonight. We have just to go through the news. Tonight you have the Citadel and the Gamecocks and the baseball diamond at 6:30. I keep talking about don't lose these midweeks, but I hope that they don't lose them. But we've talked about all the issues with the baseball program, and they've been pretty good in midweek performances of late, and hasn't carried over. But you don't want to lose the Citadel at home, so good luck to them. And then the softball team has a big one up at Clemson. The Gamecocks won the first one 6-0 over the Tigers, and they go up to Clemson to play this evening at 7. I think both those games are on SEC Network Plus. I didn't double check those, so don't quote me on that. The scroller across the bottom of this video, if you're watching on YouTube, which if you are, please like, subscribe, and share. But if you're watching on YouTube, it'll have the correct TV if that's not correct. Hats off to the 3 Gamecock women's basketball players drafted in the WNBA draft last night. Tahina Paopao goes number 18 to the Atlanta Dream. Bree Hall goes number 20 to the Indiana Fever. And Sanaya Fagan, number 21 to the LA Sparks. It's first time I think Carolina's had 3 go like that. So hats off to Dawn Staley and her outstanding program. We're all hoping on the football end of things to have a big draft coming up as well. I saw a projection. Yeah, some of the projections have been coming in at like 5 or 6, and I see the list of Gamecock players that I guess the experts don't feel will be drafted. And I'm like, how do you pass on that guy? It maybe I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm singularly focused and I need to take a look at some other players and compare, and maybe that's all me, but I kind of look at the measurables and like Rocket Sanders. Everybody's talking up this running back draft class. It's the best ever, best in years, 25 deep, no Rocket. And I'm like, well, why wouldn't you want the 235-pound guy that runs 4.47 that has soft hands? You can play him all 3 downs. That's the feedback I've gotten about Rocket from contacts and the pros. But I understand running backs don't have a big draft, value like they once did. You have to be super special now to get drafted high as a running back in the NFL because they wear down, and you kind of plug and play. That's what Rico Dowdle, starting running back, rushed for 1,000 yards for the Cowboys because he got on the practice squad, waited his turn. The guys ahead of him wore down. They don't want the big contract, so It's a money ball thing at that position. Rocket did have some injury issues, and I understand that, but man, he's healthy and ready to go. Somebody's going to get a steal. I just can't see him not getting drafted. Same with Josh Simon and O'Donnell Fortune and Torricelli Simpkins, Tonka Hemming, all those folks toward the end. But I did see a mock yesterday. It had 8. 7 is the record. They did have, gosh, what was it, 9 drafted back in the 50s, but there were like 300 players selected in that draft, something like that. 16 rounds. So they must have been loaded. I don't know what the record was back then, but in this era of college football and pro football, Gamecocks have never, ever had more than 7. So I would like to see that. They set a record for combine invite, so I'd like to see that translate. Hopefully it does. But women's basketball, 3, that's a good number. And hats off to Dawn Staley and her crew, and they continue to work the transfer portal. So do the men. John Whittle had a report yesterday on the Big Spur outlining some potential targets. A couple of guys are lining up for visits. So there's from the West Coast. One is a mid-major, one is a high major. So who knows? I don't know. I have not talked to anyone. I read it just like you did. He also pointed out the staff's pretty excited about Kobe Knox, and so am I. I've thought that was a sneaky good pickup for a while. And you think with his bloodlines and family that the chances of him busting are very slim. He played well at South Florida under tough circumstances. And then you kind of look at the fact that he plays good defense and can shoot. And there's a long, lengthy wing. I mean, so he's basically replacing Zach Davis. So compare the two and see if they've upgraded. You tell me, folks. You tell me on that end of things. All right. So this is not going to be the longest episode of Coffee. I need to kind of cut them down anyway. The ideal time is like 25, 30 minutes. So just telling you that in advance, but you never know. Once I get started, I may look up, and we've spent minutes upon minutes upon minutes discussing. But did want to talk to you about tomorrow. The transfer portal opens. And here's the thing right now. And maybe I'm a little, I don't know, maybe I'm a little, I don't want to say spooked, but nervous, apprehensive, that kind of thing, just because of where we're at in college football. And maybe that's me. I always say all the time, ignore the narrative, latch on to reality. That's kind of my thing a lot. I think maybe I am doing what I say not to do. Okay. I'm just going to preface all this with saying that. I have no intel that indicates in any way. And they asked the coordinators yesterday about it. And, both were like, we hadn't had any discussions with guys leaving. But then it was also mentioned, well, they have agents and they sort of handle all that. And, Mike Shula and Clayton White were like, well, just move on. As coaches these days, there's not much you can even do because you're out of the conversation many times, which makes me want to throw up. Because whereas in college football and coaching, we vilify coaches a lot. Number one, their salaries are probably too high. Just to be honest, I know a lot of coaches, and I've never personally thought anything was wrong with them making money, especially assistant coaches who are on year-to-year contracts and move their families 8 times in 8 years and things like that. And head coaches at some point were assistants too, and traveling, moving their families and stuff. They do sacrifice a lot for their profession. And you can't really put a numerical value on that, right? None of us can. Family comes first. And so there's some vilification and stuff out there with coaches, and especially with rival fans. I mean, none of you folks, most of you don't think too highly of Dabo, or didn't think too highly of Tommy Bowden or Kirby, or name it, that kind of thing. And that happens. It's part of sports. that's your rival or it's a team you want to beat. Phil Fulmer, nobody liked him um, when he was at Tennessee, taking all the players from down here. Yeah, because you don't like the program, you don't like the colors, and that's fine. I'm with you there. And then some of the stuff you hear in recruiting, you're like, my goodness. And there are some folks that back in the day, the butcher recruiters, they had nothing to lose. They just go in there and say whatever to get the guy. That's kind of changed now. Number one, kids are a lot smarter. I don't want to say kids are a lot smarter. Kids are a lot more wise, and parents are a lot more, because information is so readily available. So somebody's just lying to you, they're lying, so you can't just BS your way in recruiting anymore. You have to have authentic relationships to really be good at it. And there's not an authentic relationship around between human beings that's based on mendacity and falsehoods. Boy, that was a good line. It's early, folks. Nevertheless, so I get it that some coaches get vilified, and we could talk about the salaries and all that. That's a fair discussion. But 95% of these folks got into coaching because they care about helping young people, right? They also love football a lot. And most of them believe football is a way to enhance your life as a young person. And I think there's lots of ways you can enhance your life as a young person. You don't have to play football because not everybody can play football at this level, right? Football ends. In the guy in high school that doesn't play football, that may play another sport, or maybe he's really good at playing an instrument or a great writer or actor or singer or whatever, that's fine. Chase your passion. That can be just as enriching. It's not singular, but as far as football coaches go, their idea, and maybe they're naive, and maybe some of them have lost this along the way, but most of them still care about helping young people. They get paid handsomely for it, but they help young people, and that's their focus. And, their job also is to win, and they're accountable to their schools and to put together teams, right? So taking them completely out of the process with regards to their team and with regards to the fact that they may not really be into the money part of it. In fact, largely most of them aren't. They understand the value, and they understand where the player stands, and they understand the football part. And when we talk about Nico, it is a football mistake that they are making. It is Nico didn't really slap the face of the University of Tennessee, because Tennessee's the one that decided to not pay. He kind of slapped the face of the game, right? Because this was not about football. You have an offense in the University of Tennessee that if you can Nico's got a good arm, good downfield passer, accurate, it should be more accurate than he was, but, there's no reason why you can't put up 1 billion yards, and that looks good. And look, because of Patrick Mahomes, who played in an air raid offense and college, and he's all world, the pros, it helps you if you're in a pro style offense, kind of get on the radar a little bit more. They like that, but it's not like what it used to be where they're system quarterbacks. No, it's not. Patrick Mahomes changed all that. And so you had this golden opportunity football wise. You're right there on easy street. You have the dad trying to be the personnel manager at Tennessee too. They need help and blah, blah, blah. And, so you're going to tell them who to recruit. You're going to be like, why don't you join the message board and just put your opinion out there and trash every recruit they bring in blindly? I don't know. So the problem, big picture wise, with all this is the coaches are taken out of it to a certain extent. And Clayton White kind of alluded to that yesterday. I'll tell you, Shane Beamer is involved with every aspect of the program. People talk about general managers Shane Beamer is the general manager of South Carolina football, and there's nobody more qualified to be the general manager of South Carolina football than Shane Beamer. The whole you're not he's never been a coordinator, that crap we had to all live through for a long time, not just from other fan bases, but also the media pointing that out. I mean, it's insane. It has nothing to do with being a good head coach or not a good head coach. I pointed out before, Clemson's won 3 national championships in their history. Both were won by guys that not only were first-year coaches, but their first-time coaches, meaning their first head coaching job was Clemson. They also were position coaches. Danny Ford was the O-line coach, and Dabo Swinney was the receivers coach. Both happened to be from Alabama, too. Very interesting. But, yeah, I mean, and Clemson's not alone. I mean, Lou Holtz was never a coordinator, right? Urban Meyer was never a coordinator. The list goes on and on and on. But you still fought that. Well, and look, I'll say this: when the offensive coordinator situation was a dumpster fire in Beamer's first 2 years, would it have been helpful to have a guy that was a play caller on the sidelines to step in and say, "Whoa, how about stop?" Yes, absolutely. But that's okay. I mean, because some guys that just want to call plays all the time, they don't want to recruit and they don't want to do anything else. They don't worry about culture. And in this climate, they're kind of screwed. Lane Kiffin's an exception to that because he sort of is a recruiter too. I mean, his strengths as a head coach have always been recruiting and calling ball plays. But so on that point, I think now that's a strength for Beamer because he's just a head coach and is involved in all aspects and is coaching his butt off on the field. But he's also an overseer and a general manager these days, and he's qualified to do it because some of this not going to overpay, not going to do this stuff that it was out there during the first portal period. I mean, the buck stops with Shane Beamer, and I applaud him because guess what? And this is my big point of the day. A storm is coming to college football. Now, sometimes we all know from being from South Carolina, you have hurricane warnings and everybody tapes up their windows and gets sandbags and all the bread and milk is gone. And, you evacuate. Gosh, I still remember Hurricane Floyd, one of my friends, Charleston to Greenville, I think it took 7 hours that time. So we know all about that, right? And sometimes it's not as bad. A couple trees are down, you lost power for a while, whatever. Sometimes it's worse. Just like this past year, then it hit, so you just don't know. So there's an unknown there. So you got to kind of ride it out, and you got to hope for the best. And like I said, there's no knowledge of anybody. And when I say anybody going in the portal, because I kind of got in trouble yesterday, I was like, well, it looks like they've avoided guys leaving except Wendell Gregory, and then Emory Floyd jumps in the portal. When I say that, Wendell Gregory to me would fit into this category. It's two things. Here's who you don't want to lose, right? Primarily, like if you have a young player that in 3 years is going to be a baller, like an offensive lineman, you don't want to lose that guy, right? But here's who you don't want to lose. Difference makers, like guys, that would be everybody from Lenore Sellers and Dylan Stewart to, Fred Johnson, Vakari Swain, Judge Collier, Jalon Kilgore, all those guys. They're difference makers. And there's more difference makers now. I'm just talking about proven difference makers, guys that are back, the guys that you don't want to lose that. You also don't want to lose anybody at a position to where your numbers are going to be off and you can't survive injuries if they leave. In other words, like at edge, they were fine. They got Jaylen Brown out of the portal. You have Wendell Gregory. Away you go. That's 6, upper classmen returning type guys. and then two freshmen. Well, you're good at edge in that situation. But now you got Jalen Brown way up in the air, leaning towards, don't count on him. And then you have Wendell Gregory just left. So that hurts. That hurts. Emory Floyd leaves. You're kind of, he was sort of the sixth team corner, special teams at best. He's been here a while. He just hasn't, really fast player, good kid, worked hard. Surprised, really, he stayed this past year. But just kind of got recruited over and never made that jump as a corner. Wish him well. I hope he goes someplace and plays a lot. And certainly, he picked Carolina during a time. Carolina maybe wasn't the coolest spot, but Emory Floyd did jump in the portal yesterday. So I got in trouble because I said nobody. But what are those categories like I mentioned, difference makers, people at positions where you need numbers, and then honestly, yeah, young, promising guys. I mean, you don't want Cutter Woods or Aaron Nolan hitting the portal at quarterback, that Cam Pringle, that kind of thing. So when you look at it, that's what you have to survive. I believe Carolina is going to be somewhat active. Like I said, I know for sure they're going to try to find a D tackle. I hope that works out for them. But I think what's more important, and some of you may not agree, because I agree, and I agree with you on this. It's fun to get new players and see who you're going to get, upgrade your roster. It makes for a summer of anticipation. But I'm telling you, right with the way things are, if South Carolina can have a quiet portal period, and what I mean is get a couple of guys, no big fireworks, guys that'll make the fan base excited because the hardcore fans, the folks that follow the depth chart that like understand, hey, it's a good defensive tackle, all that stuff, but not necessarily have any kind of losses that I mean, really, it makes your program kind of look bad. It's inevitable. You're not immune to it. South Carolina's certainly not immune to it. But there's so many surprises and there's so many secret conversations going on in the sport. Again, no knowledge of anything at Carolina that I think if you keep everything in order, intact, guys are focused on football and getting better and having a big summer and getting ready to go win next year and being confident in the fact they can do so, then South Carolina is going to be pretty formidable this season as a starting point. Now, you never know what's going to happen in the games. Very encouraged, by the way, by what Clayton White said about the linebackers. He said he was surprised. You got a lot of big, fast dudes, and I think that's cool. But see, that's one position that we kind of were like, what's going to happen here? And I'm like, okay, well, that's going to happen. But so my point is with the storm rolling into the sport, not necessarily to Carolina, to the sport, you got to kind of ride it out, whatever analogy you want to use, and get there, get to the summer with your roster intact, because there's a lot of good football players on this roster. There's a lot of good football players on every roster in the SEC. And really a lot of other schools too. That said, if chaos has already struck at Tennessee. And look, I don't know what the Vols record will be. These things kind of go two ways. I know they're going to try to get a quarterback. That's going to cause chaos at another school, if they get a proven guy that's supposed to be the starter somewhere. Yeah, it's obviously going to cause a lot of chaos. But that's still, you lose your starting quarterback at the end of spring practice. There's nothing you can do besides summer workouts between now and camp. So whoever the quarterback's going to be, you can't really kind of start coaching him as the starter until camp. And quarterback's important. Now Tennessee opens with Syracuse down in Atlanta. There'll be a bunch of orange in Atlanta that Saturday before the Gamecocks play. Virginia Tech is maroon and orange too. So it's like three of the four teams in town orange. Oh boy. But so they open in Atlanta too, and but then their schedule, I got Georgia early. Georgia's very young. Tennessee's going to be pretty good on defense. I don't know that they're going to hit the over under of 9.5 nor go back to the playoff, but I didn't necessarily think that. I thought the 9.5 was a little high, for them because some of these teams they beat last year are going to be better. They go to, like, for example, they got to go to Mississippi State. Similar style offense. Most people don't have a lot of high expectations for Mississippi State, and they play like five playoff teams. They scheduled Arizona State, wrong time to do that. But they got 51 new players, and that's before this portal period. So you don't know what they're going to do. I have no idea. Nobody does. So Tennessee has to go down there. They have to go to the swamp late in the season. They haven't beaten Georgia under Heupel. Who knows? I think Georgia's got some stuff. I know for a fact Kirby Smart, because his roster's kind of flipping over, and now this new batch of young guys. Obviously, when you recruit at that level, all your players are pretty much well known. They all have agents. They're all highly recruited. So there's a lot more chatter they have to deal with than maybe at another school. That's a distraction. I just don't know that some of these other places are going to survive. Not survive. That's a dramatic word there, JC. Are going to have a peaceful off season where the focus is just on ball, which you need. Which most of the time before all this, every school was kind of like that. Yeah, sometimes you had an injury or a transfer or something like that. But before the portal, after spring, everybody just kind of took a break in May and then went to work. Let's go. Now there's all this off the field stuff, and it's unfortunate. There has to be a better way to pay players, and give them their cut than to deal with it like it is a professional sport. And to deal with it with these people that want employment drive me nuts. They don't understand. Well, if you had employment, you could just fire them, and well, that's kind of the point. I mean, it's better for the player to be an independent contractor. I think we do need contracts. I think we do need to get the people that aren't agents out. And I think coaches and the like, and I think they're doing that with Nico because they claim they could get all this money, but there's nobody lining up to sign him right now. Right? So good job, college football. And not that I don't, I don't wish ill on the kid, and I hope he goes pro, and he's a tremendously gifted quarterback. But at some point, for the good of the game, you can't sit there and be greedy and go, yeah. Now, look, if Deshaun Foster takes him at UCLA, I don't have a problem with that. He's a hometown kid. They need all the help they can get. Obviously, he's not going to have the weapons to work with there that he did at Tennessee. And oh, by the way, you're foolishly in the Big Ten now. So have fun with that late November start at Minnesota or whatever, But if you thought Ohio State was cold, wait. But nevertheless, that's what's going to have to happen, in some ways too, is just we're not playing the bull crap anymore. But you can't do anything about that now, especially if you're South Carolina. And I don't, everything seems hunky dory. I think Beamer's done a great job establishing a culture. And I think, give credit to the athletics administration for the facilities and for making hires like Derek Moore and the nutrition staff and the strength staff. And I mean, it's all first class, right? If you look back, at the olden times, 4 or 5 years ago, when it was just about, this is second to none what they do at Carolina. And it's different and unique. And I think, and everybody says it. If you go look on the Gamecock Football social media account. You had a bunch of NFL GMs, coaches, whatever, talking about how Carolina's different. And I think when you're not a blue blood, being different is good. I think Clemson is a blue blood now. I don't know that the 1981 national championship and then a big drought made them that way when Dabo took over. But what did they do? They're out there trying to win it all, recruiting well. And strategically, what Dabo did was, okay, Urban Meyer's going to get this many big time guys at Ohio State. Georgia's going to get their share. But before Kirby, they were beating Georgia on in-state kids. Some of them are going to Saban in Alabama. Those are two distinctly different styles of coaching than what Clemson was all about. And some kids, they want kind of the pro structured whatever. And then some kids, they'd rather go where there's a sliding board. And then it's because it's fun and it's college. You can win both ways. And I think Beamer has instilled this kind of fun place to play. Recruits good people, good kids. They have good parents. And it's not that everybody. It's 85 guys plus walk-ons. On a roster, and not everybody's going to fit this perfect mold. These are humans, and it happens. But for the most part, South Carolina, and you talk to recruits and coaches and players, even in this money-driven era, South Carolina's a cool place to play, right? And so that helps. Culture before all this sort of got overused. And then there were some naysayers out there that said, well, culture's not going to matter at all now. It's all pro sports. It's all about money. Well, it is, but it's also about human nature and young people in the sense that, and these are young people, right? These are not pros. In the sense of, you got a bunch of guys with the way NIL's done now, they're getting paid anyway. It doesn't matter if they play bad or good. There's nothing to kind of, there's no fines for loafing, nothing like that, because you can't do it because it's NIL. It's not pay for play. You can opt out, whatever. So, when you look at it like that, there are teams, and you can notice, it's noticeable, that just they decide collectively in their young minds, well, we don't have to show up today. And hey, that's young people. Dude, I remember when I was that age, I want to go kick my own butt every time I think about it, because I'm like, God, because I probably cost myself some sort of opportunity early in my career or later in college because I was a dumb idiot, and that even the smartest, best kid out there is going to make mistakes. So Beamer's done a good job of massaging, sculpting, whatever analogy you want to use, all of that. And friends, I've said it. That's why Carolina, same old Carolina, sitting at 1-3, 3-3. Two devastating, just gut-wrenching losses. Those close losses to Alabama and LSU, I guarantee you hurt the players a lot more than Ole Miss because they're games they could have won. Play here, play there. I went back and watched Alabama the other day, man. I don't know. I know it's Kalen DeBoer's Alabama, not Nick Saban's Alabama. I have not seen a defense at times just physically beat Alabama like that. Maybe in the Oklahoma game later on in the season they did, but wow. Carolina's living in the backfield. It looked like, I don't know. It's going to be an interesting game this year, but that's an aside. But, you're sitting there at 1-3, and then everybody just decides no more. And then they get on a roll and start playing up to their potential. It wasn't perfect, but the beauty of how that team responded mentally last year was, okay, they passed a series of tests. All right, so Oklahoma was basically a must win. If you don't want to fall to 3-4 and then have a top 10 team coming in, and they go out and spank them. And then A&M comes in undefeated in the league. That's a team you hadn't beaten too often, and you spank them. Well, then there's Vandy. That's a landmine, and it's tough to play up there. Great crowd, and you spank them. Well, then Missouri comes in and you're spanking them. And oh, yeah. And so at that point, you're rolling. Then Missouri comes back. And front runners, folks that cannot respond to adversity would have absolutely collapsed in that game once Missouri took the lead, the first lead, much less the second. And they didn't. Clemson's winning the game all day. Carolina shooting itself in the foot, blah, 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 blah. All of a sudden, field goal. All of a sudden, failed onside kick. Oh, God. They stop them. They go down the field, and they beat them. Now, it didn't work in the Illinois game. Was a case of the Gamecocks shooting themselves in the foot once too often. That has to change. That's a football thing. But the mental makeup and mindset to go do that, and you have that ingrained in your program, and in the near term, if you can keep all that intact moving forward through this storm of college football coming up, then I think South Carolina's going to be in great position. Let everybody else have all the chaos, incoming, outgoing, whatever, this portal period, folks. And just hope that the Gamecocks kind of sail right along through the calming seas or the rough seas or whatever. Just hope they get through. And then at the end of April, when we get into the May months, we can all kind of breathe easy and really start chopping it up. Because at that point, kickoff is 3 months for Memorial Day weekend. How about that? So anyway, don't forget the morning show later today with JB. John Strickland, Big Strick's going to be in to talk ball. Mike Morgan will co-host, and Phil and I'll be along with the show with a number of topics later today. I got to go get on 107.5 with my boy Wild Bill Gunner and do an hour with him and Preston talking Gamecocks there, chopping it up. Thanks for listening to Coffee. JC Shurburtt out. Holla at you soon.